President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has lauded the establishment of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, spearheaded by Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, as a groundbreaking initiative in tackling one of the world's most pressing challenges. Speaking at the opening session of the 19th G20 Leaders Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, President Tinubu described the alliance as a bold and visionary step towards eradicating hunger and poverty. He emphasized its importance in fostering collaboration among governments, international organizations, and civil society to address immediate needs and the structural causes of these global issues. He reiterated Nigeria's readiness to adopt innovative global practices and leverage international partnerships to enhance domestic strategies aimed at improving the quality of life for its citizens. In his address, President Tinubu also underscored the need for comprehensive reform of the United Nations Security Council to better reflect global diversity and ensure equitable representation. He called on the G20 to champion Africa's inclusion in the Council with 2 permanent seats, emphasizing Nigeria's capacity to serve as a representative of the continent. He commended the G20 for granting permanent membership to the African Union, describing it as a significant step towards inclusive global governance. Concluding his remarks, President Tinubu urged the G20 to lead in addressing systemic inequities in global governance, including reforms in international taxation and financial systems. He stressed that these changes are critical to bridging the gap between the global north and south, promoting sustainable development and ensuring a more equitable future for developing nations. Well, President Ahmed Tinubu, at the end of his address, reaffirmed Nigeria's commitment to working with global partners in achieving these objectives. I am Victoria Clinton, and thanks for joining us on Nigeria Today. Now, with me in the studio is an international relations expert, Dr. Adoy Matthew Omali. It's good to have you in Nigeria today.
Good evening, Eukaria, and thanks for having me.
And joining us via Zoom from Brazil is the SSA, Media and Publicity to the President, Tokwe Ajayi. Thanks for joining us on Nigeria Today.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Rio and good evening in Nigeria.
Tokwe, without much ado, tell us, what is the significance of President Tinubu's participation in the G20 summit?
Well, thank you. The significance of our president's participation at this summit that just ended a few hours ago is the fact that the world and the group of 20 most industrialized countries in the world recognizes Nigeria's importance and role in global affairs, and Nigeria as the leading country, or as we say, as the giant of Africa. So Nigeria not being a member of G20, the host president, which is President Lula, found it necessary to invite President Tinubu as a special guest to participate in this year's G20 summit, and also the significance of the subject of the subject matter of the summit, which can also be which is also the theme, is about addressing global poverty and hunger. So the world is building a global alliance against hunger and poverty, and Nigeria as the largest country in Africa. And of course, you know that we can't talk about poverty and building a global alliance or any effort at eradicating poverty. Such effort, we also have to look at Africa, because again, some of those challenges around poverty are still prevalent. So Nigeria cannot be ignored, where matters of global significance of this nature is being discussed. So I guess that is why the host president found it necessary to invite our president to be part of the G20 summit.
Now, thank you very much. I haven't talked about the Global Alliance Against Hunger and, of course, poverty. Now, let's look at the address given by the president. Now, the president called on the G20 to champion African's inclusion in the security, in the UN Security Council, calling for a two permanent seat for Africa, and of course pledging the commitment of Africa, of Nigeria's readiness to participate or to represent Africa. So what would this permanent seat mean for Africa as a continent, and of course Nigeria?
Well, Nigeria has always been ready to take leadership position or leadership role in global affairs. And talking about UN permanent seats, I don't think that any country in Africa that deserves the seat more than Nigeria, given our role in global affairs, given our contribution to global peace, and since the 60s, Nigeria has been contributing troops to peacekeeping operations across the world, starting from Congo to Yugoslavia to Nigeria. Nigeria literally helped. If Liberia and Sierra Leone are still existing today as a country, it is because Nigeria made it happen. So Nigeria single-handedly ended the war, the civil war in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and different parts of the world where Nigeria has been contributing to keep peacekeeping operations, whether it's Sudan, whether it's Yugoslavia, just name it. And apart from military contribution to global peace, in terms of soft power, Nigeria has been, through our technical aid corps, through cultural exchanges, through multilateralism and bilateralism. So Nigeria has been very, very, very active in global affairs. So there's no way we'll be talking about Security Council seat for Africa. Nigeria is the right country, well positioned in terms of our population, in terms of our economic size, in terms of our military strength. Nigeria is in pole position to lead Africa on UN Security Council. Of course, Nigeria is asking for 2 seats, and our President Tinubu made a very strong argument in his address to G20 summit that, one, Africa is a continent of over a billion people, and there is no way. And Security Council is the highest decision. Security Council is the highest decision organ, highest decision-making organ of the UN system. So there is no way, there is no reason why before now the membership should have been opened up to include at least 2 countries in Africa. So that debate has been raging in the last 10 decades. I think the time is now for the UN system to open up the permanent membership seats to include Africa. At the moment, Africa is asking for 2 countries. And I think asking for 2 countries is not too much for Africa. And we continue to make that demand on the global world order. And surely, and at the moment, I think the US system is open to that. So we are hoping that any moment from now, that request will be acceded to. And when it comes to nomination time for that membership, it should surely come to Nigeria. And that was the point that President Tinubu also made in his address.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tokwe. Now back to you, Dr. Matthew. Of course, you've heard quite a lot of things that Tokwe had to say there about the present commitment, and the Nigeria's readiness to be very representative of Africa on the United Nations Security Seat. Now, back to the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. How does this align with Nigeria's, broader economic goal?
Well, it aligns perfectly with Nigeria economic goal. Just like the president said in his speech, um, since he assumed office, he has been trying assiduously to see how he can tackle the issue of hunger and poverty. Don't forget that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, SDGs, 1 and 2, expressly talk about eradicating hunger by 2030. And no effort is spared towards achieving that because of the ravaging nature of hunger and poverty. And Mr. President made it very clear that food security remains a very, very important aspect, especially in Africa and most developing countries, being able to provide food security. So this initiative is very laudable because it's key into Mr. President's economic agenda of trying to resolve the issue of poverty and hunger that has been ravaging the country and the continent of Africa and several other places. And I think there's no other forum that is better to address this type of issues because the group of 20 developed countries, the G20, is a forum where bulk of the resources of the world circulates, and their support in this regard is very, very much needed at this point in time to drive or to eradicate issues of poverty and hunger.
Okay. Now, having said that, now how does Nigeria's inclusion in this in such high-level discussion reflect on its growing influence in global politics?
Just like Tokwe just said, you cannot wash Nigeria away. Nigeria remains a very, very integral part of the international system. With a population of over 200 million, the largest black nation in the world, with our contribution to development of the globe diasporally, with Nigerians excelling in almost all spheres of human endeavors. You cannot underestimate Nigerian presence. And like he has said, our contribution to global affairs speaks for us. If they are to give the Security Council strictly on merit, I think Nigeria deserves the seat from Africa, the permanent seat from Africa, because we have paid our dues. We have, over the years, Tokwe mentioned right from the time of the Congo War, our capacity to send peacekeeping operations to the Liberian-Sierra Leonean War and to all the conflicts in Africa. So Nigeria deserves it. Apart from that, we are the largest economy in Africa. Forget whatever challenges that we have. The reality is that we remain one of the largest economy, one of the most endowed economy in terms of mineral resources and of course, we are one of the largest producers of petroleum in the world, and that speaks for us. So the international community will be looking forward to Nigeria on that seat. Don't forget that we championed the cause for the liberation of most of Africa. We championed the cause of liberation of South Africa. We championed the liberation of Angola. We championed the liberation of Sudan. So there's no other country that can really fit into that seat than Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much. Now back to you, Tokwe. You know, during the president's speech, he talked about the disparity that arises between the global north and the global south. Now, he also talked about the international tax system, which leaves the developing countries such as us at at disadvantage, especially in taxing digital economy, favoring more the affluent nation. So, how important is it for the G20, leaders to rise up to the quest of bridging this gap between the global north and the global south?
Okay, like my colleague on the show rightly said, the almost more than 80% of the global resources of the wealth of the world today is actually is held by the members of the G20 group. So, and that inequality is glaring in terms of development, whether in infrastructure or human capacity or human capital, as the case may be. So then you are talking about tax system. Most of the G20 countries and the UN system again, talking about UN system, they have a role to play in how, in terms of finance, how the global wealth flows across the world, and how the global wealth also flows into financing development in developing countries, especially in Nigeria. Then how do countries of the world get resources apart from extractive economy, payments of taxes? Then most of the multinationals that operate in Africa, for example, and other developing nations of the world, are they paying their right taxes to the governments of the developing nations in Africa or to a country like Nigeria? I think talking about inequality and justice for global South is demanding that the global South and developing nations, as the case may be, get a fair treatment in terms of development financing, and making sure that those who control the wealth of the world ensure that they support development and the fight against poverty in the global South. So I think the president made that point very strongly in his speech, and that most of the tax havens around the world are actually within the jurisdictions of the developed nations, whether you're talking about the islands around the world where that are tax havens. So these issues, in terms of influence and control over the global wealth, the G20 member countries have a role to play, and making sure that multinational companies, individuals, eventually leaders within in developing countries like Africa, who found a safe haven in some of these countries in hiding their the resources of their country. So the members, the G20 countries, should, in terms of laws that support or promote the pillage of resources from countries like Africa, they have strong legislation against that, and that our wealth that have been looted and stashed abroad, in terms of, they should make sure that they are repatriated to fund development back in Africa. So President Tinubu made that argument strongly in his speech.
Thank you very much, Tokwe. Now back to you, Dr. Adoye. Now, quite a lot has been said about bridging the gap between the global South, of course, and the global North. Now, what specific collaborations should we be, gunning for at this point between the G20 nations and the African communities?
Yes, the gap is very, very wide. It's wide because of several issues. The colonial legacies, colonialism, where raw materials were taken away from most developing countries to develop the metropoles, as it is in political economy, we say so. So most of these resources were taken, diamond, gold, crude oil, all these were taken to develop those areas. And it's now time for African countries to begin to take control of their own resources if they need to bridge these differences between the North and the South. Another very important point to note about the disparity between the North and South is the industrialization. There's a huge gap in the area of industrialization. While the South basically export raw materials. The North process these raw materials and send it back to the South as finished products. So if the South really need to, if the inequality between the North and South need to be bridged, then we also have to look at how the South can be industrialized. And the North has a lot of role to play, especially in the area of technology transfer. The North should be able to assist, if they are talking about eradicating poverty, if they are talking about bridging inequality between the North and South, then the area to go is for them to be able to support the South in terms of job creation, in terms of industrialization, in terms of developing small-scale industries and so on. And the North should be able to summon the courage to do that, because they are in the position to really assist the South to attain industrialization. Instead of taking our raw materials to the North could establish these industries here in the South and engage in the production, and then they can take it to whatever areas in the world that they need to take it to.
Now, in this regard, when you say the North and the South, it's good you just put a little bit of clarification. So
no, when we talk about the North, we are talking about basically the G20 countries, the advanced country. And when we talk about the South, we are talking about the global South. We are talking about the developing or underdeveloped economies of the world.
Thank you very much. Now, to you, Tokpe, before we go, now, what are the expected outcomes of the president's participation in this in the G20 summit?
Well, the outcomes are it's about seeking partnership, seeking collaboration with the developed nations of the world to advance the development and shared prosperity agenda of the president. And on this trip, the Nigerian government will be signing agreement on food security, agricultural livestock development with Brazilian government. And the negotiation, I can tell you, is currently ongoing with Nigerian delegation, already working with the team from the Brazilian government team. So President Tinubu will be coming back home with a bag of goodies on different areas of cooperation. And like they also did in his appeal to the group of 20 most developed countries in the world, those cooperations in area of human capital development, security, poverty eradication, shared prosperity that the summit had agreed on. So we are hoping that beyond what had been said and what had been agreed through the communique that will be issued, is Africa, the developing world, want to begin to see concrete action in how the wealthy countries treat the rest of the world, especially countries in Africa. So the benefits are immense, and we know that as we go on, Nigerians will begin to see the benefits of this trip in the way President Tinubu begin to further realize his renewed hope agenda.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. That was the SSA, Media and Publicity to the President, Tokpe Ajayi. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
And here in the studio, we had an international relations expert, Dr. Adoyi Matthew Omali. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the program. Remember, Nigeria Today airs every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTU News 24. You can also check out these episodes and others on www.youtube.com/NTU News 24 Hub. I am Ikaria Clinton. Goodbye.